2025 may go down as a landmark year for gaming. Something changed this year, and I couldn't put my finger on what until I looked at everything I played in the last 12 months. It didn't take me long to realize that big AAA games did not really capture my attention this year, and based on the games that were both nominated and won big during this year's award season, there seems to be a similar underlying sentiment across the gaming industry. That is, if you're not obsessed with only playing games that feature a gun or a ball. So how did we get here? Why has the popularity of independent and AA games skyrocketed? Well, when you're tired of playing the same things over and over, and organ harvesters are more likely to steal your RAM than your kidneys, it's natural that you would flock to things that give you fresh experiences for cheaper prices that don't demand the latest hardware. Today, to celebrate this year's radiating creativity across gaming's wide spectrum of genres, themes, and price points, I want to show you 30 of the most engaging, eye-catching, and cool things I played this year. These are the best games of 2025. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly explain all of the information you'll see at the top of every title. For each game, you'll see the game's developer and publisher, its price in USD, how long it takes to beat, and every platform the game is available on, including cloud services. If you see one name listed for developer publisher, that means the game is self-published. Though I've beaten almost every game here, unless specified otherwise, the completion times are based on howlongtobeat.com's main story time, because my own hours aren't that far off and I play games slower than most anyways. Finally, if there's two prices listed, the first is for the game's standard edition and the second for whichever is most expensive. There won't be too many games like that today, but it's better that you know the all-in cost of anything you see here. And with that, let's get started with our first category. Sometimes you just want to lay back. With the older I've gotten, the less stress I like when gaming, so this category is dedicated to the best and most laid-back games I played this year. Date Everything is a visual novel dating simulator parody that sees you forming relationships with the 100+ objects around your house. Honestly, Date Everything is the best fever dream I've ever played. I don't know how anyone came up with this concept, but boy does it work, especially because the characters are portrayed by every voice actor you've heard in the last 30 years. In Date Everything, after you lose your job to AI, you receive a package with special glasses called Date VA that reveal objects in your house as dateable personalities. When they say date everything, they really mean everything. From the walls to the doors, your appliances, your bed, things in your crawl space, dirty laundry, and so much more. Each day you can talk to 5 objects and vie for their friendship or love, though depending on your responses and actions, you can also get them to hate you. Each character has an attribute attached to them that corresponds to points you can use for progression and an endgame mechanic. Though the concept of Date Everything can sound like a gimmick, it is a fully realized game with an exorbitant amount of characters and branching narrative paths. Featuring some of the best and most creative character designs I've seen in a long time, and some absolutely hysterical character moments, Date Everything has actually turned out to be one of my favorite games, not just of this year, but ever. I've always had a soft spot for visual novels, and with the sheer amount of well-written characters it has, the freedom it gives players to explore and define their own relationships, and the game's underlying message about the types of bonds we form, Date Everything is one of 2025's most genuine and endearing games. A third-person shooter may not immediately spring to mind when you think casual and chill, but things might start to click after seeing a game starring a 10-year-old girl. Onirism is a shooter, platformer, adventure game where you play as Carole, a little girl that ends up in a fantasy world after vowing revenge on the mysterious figure who stole her plushie in the middle of the night. Onirism is a love letter to various shooters of old. It's a throwback in the best way possible, reminiscent of games like Serious Sam, Time Splitters, and my favorite, Unreal Tournament. In Onirism, you have to get Carole's plushie back, which takes you through countless levels and worlds with their own distinct looks, enemies, and characters that Carole has to shoot her way through with the help of Onirism's kid-friendly, but enemy-shredding, arsenal. At the center of Onirism is Carole, whose take-no-crap attitude alongside her in-game mechanical agility make her one of the best boomer shooter protagonists. Carole can dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge using the game's movement system, which makes fighting enemies, especially with all of the game's unique weapons, an absolute blast. Onirism's gameplay is definitely on the simpler side, but that's why it works. It's a shooter that understands the games that influenced it, and isn't trying to reinvent them as much as play to their strengths. Onirism is what I would strangely call a feel-good game. I smile when I realize the things it's referencing, and I enjoy stepping back into certain worlds or using guns that I never thought I would again. Onirism is enormous. When I said countless levels, I wasn't kidding. This is one of the biggest games on this list today, with over 20 levels, each massive in their own right. For its price and amount of quality content, Onirism is one of 2025's best deals in gaming. Ambrosia Sky is a narrative clean-em-up where you're sent to retrieve the DNA of those involved with a spatial fungal outbreak near the planet Saturn. I called Ambrosia Sky a clean-em-up, akin to Power Wash Simulator. To clear infestations of spores, you'll need every cleaning solution upgrade the game has to offer, which you can obtain by carefully harvesting special fruit growing on the fungus. Though the gameplay is straightforward, Ambrosia Sky often flirts with immersive sim elements through its mechanics and fantastic level design. There's special rooms with collectibles and additional narrative importance that you can only open by powering them. Finding and connecting the power by using one of the many upgrades to your cleaning solutions was both fun and emergent when I didn't expect it. Easily some of the most fun parts of Ambrosia Sky involve its zero-G and grapple mechanics, required to get to some hard-to-reach places to clean. Unlike many games in this genre, Ambrosia Sky has a heavy narrative focus, centered around main character Dahlia returning to the colony where she grew up. Ambrosia Sky is, in short, a beautiful game. One where I paused multiple times to look at environments, but was also moved by the themes of the story, and was always eager to learn more about Dahlia and her former life at the cluster. I can't quite put my finger on why, but as a massive fan of Unreal, something about Ambrosia Sky called to me. Despite its modern styling, it's a game that strikes me as having old bones. Developer Soft Rains says that Ambrosia Sky will have 2 more acts to tell the rest of Dahlia's story, and I can't wait to see what they're planning for the future. Tiny Bookshop is a narrative management game where you travel around the city of Buxton with your mobile bookshop. As someone who got back into reading earlier this year, Tiny Bookshop is absolutely fantastic. In Tiny Bookshop, you have to stock your shelves with a variety of subjects and genres to sell to the bookworms of Buxton. Customers will enter the shop and sometimes ask for specific recommendations that you have to suggest based on your available selection, and that's where having some prior book knowledge helped me personally. I've never actually played a game where that was relevant, but it was surprising and pretty cool. Every time you successfully recommend a book, you gain a temporary buff that boosts your chance to sell all books, and most of the game's mechanical complexity comes from managing your inventory, customizing your shop, figuring out which books to recommend, and doing quests for characters across Buxton. Each location you can travel to has different preferences for books. For example, you'll sell more kids' books at the beach, or more travel books at the waterfront. The game has in-game seasons, each consisting of 30 calendar days and unique spots that pop up on special days. Tiny Bookshop's aesthetic, music, and gameplay amounts to the coziest experience I'm sharing today. I would gladly recommend Tiny Bookshop to anyone with an appetite for games that can be played very casually and also double as stress relievers. The Berlin Apartment is a narrative exploration game that plays through almost a century of Berlin's history, told through the eyes of the numerous tenants of a single apartment. There are 5 stories across time, starting with the overarching main characters, the young Delara and her father Malik, who renovates homes in the present day. Delara finds keepsakes and remnants of past owners, and Malik tells her their stories. You play as each character, Joseph in 1933, Matilda in 1945, Antonia in 1967, and Kolja in 1989, all with their own lives and objectives that you achieve through special gameplay interactions per episode. The Berlin Apartment is a game where its culture creates perspective. What was life like for a Jewish theater owner in the 30s, or the daughter of a Nazi officer after the war? What about a writer struggling to find her voice during the Soviet occupation, or a man who finds a friend over the Berlin Wall? Each episode is great, and the stories this game is telling are both fascinating and important. The Berlin Apartment, despite releasing so close to the end of the year, is one of 2025's best story-rich games. Insert Game Here is a game about game development, in which we, the player, wander into a prematurely published game where the developers must frantically throw together the little they've made to show us their project. As someone who finds the actual production of games as interesting as the games themselves, Insert Game Here is a hilarious meta-commentary and keyhole look at the process of game dev. Because Insert Game Here is so short, I really don't want to give away much. It's genuinely funny, and probably one of the funniest things I've played this year. The voice acting is fantastic, the gags stick, and I'm shocked by how much this game does with so little. I would like to mention that I discovered Insert Game Here after the developer reached out to me personally. It's incredibly humbling to be in anyone's thoughts, especially those of creatives asking for my opinion on their work. Ayush, I hope that you know that your talent has not gone unnoticed. And if Insert Game Here is of any indication, your future is very bright. The Ruin Wanderer, this video's shortest game, is a love letter to the Tomb Raider series. Ditching combat to focus on exploration and platforming, Ruin Wanderer sees you climbing, crawling, and jumping to attain this ancient temple's secrets. Like its polygonal style, the atmosphere and gameplay of Ruin Wanderer harken back to a time more still, where you could get lost in a game without cinematic or narrative interruptions. Though Ruin Wanderer is very much one and done due to its length, if you're a Tomb Raider fan and have missed Lara Croft in the years since her last game, you should give the Ruin Wanderer a try. Horror is an often overlooked yet rich genre that encompasses many levels and flavors of terror. Here are the best horror games I played in 2025. No, I'm Not a Human is a psychological horror visual novel, and one of 2025's most unique games. After the sun makes life outside uninhabitable, monsters resembling humans called visitors come burrowing out of the ground and start killing people. Finding strength in numbers, you have to house at least one human companion, and every night people will knock on your door asking for shelter from both the sun and visitors who go on rampages during the night. Unfortunately, because visitors look almost identical to humans, you run the risk of letting one in, where they'll pick you off one by one. I've never seen a game that looks quite like No, I'm Not a Human. Its entire tone is instantly informed by the way it looks, its art style almost necessary to properly express its themes of isolation and fear of others. The game tells us that visitors can be identified through several traits, and although there are some who knock on your door that are clearly not human, the traits aren't always accurate, making you constantly second guess if the person in your home is indeed a person. You can kill those whom you think are visitors, but you have the chance to be wrong, which has consequences and obvious moral implications. I have played a few games that feel like social experiments, but this is definitely one of them. If you determine that one of your new roommates is human and keep them around, you can learn more about them, and each of their stories is very interesting. No, I'm Not a Human is meant to be played more than once, and given its relatively short runtime, I would absolutely recommend it, especially because it's already received a bonus content update. After 13 long years, Silent Hill F is the first original game in the franchise since Downpour, and I can gladly say that I think the wait was worth it. During the early 1960s, student Shimizu Hinako, living in the farm village of Ebisugaoka, finds herself and her friends trapped in a sprawling red fog. Silent Hill F easily has the best story of a Silent Hill game since 4, and it carries the game through combat that didn't click with me personally, but could otherwise be someone else's jam. The story of Hinako made everything worthwhile for me, the tale of a young woman struggling with cultural and societal norms. Hinako, immediately shown harboring resentment for her parents, her father abusive, her mother submissive, is forced to confront growing up among rigid feminine stereotypes that separate Hinako from the other girls around her. The supporting cast of any Silent Hill game is also of crucial importance, and F's is pretty good. I loved Shu and his relationship with Hinako, who bond over more traditionally masculine hobbies, furthering Hinako's divide with her female friends like Sakuko and Rinko, who each have their own nuanced characterizations and interactions with Hinako. As with all the games in the series before it, Silent Hill F has some great puzzles, including one at the very end that was one of the most satisfying solves of the year for me. I played F on hard for both combat and puzzles, and the way the difficulty works is by making the hints more vague as you scale up. Every puzzle was a treat to figure out, all sharing some thematic relevance with the game's plot. To top it all off, Silent Hill F is an amazing looking game, and one of this year's best examples of how to stylize something with realistic fidelity, with the atmosphere and enemy designs being among the game's best work. Silent Hill F is exactly the type of game the franchise needed to both return to its roots and continue its legacy in the world of psychological horror. By Sweet Carole is an animated puzzle stealth platformer where you fall down a dark rabbit hole while investigating the disappearance of your best friend. I love games that wear their influences on their sleeves, and as you can see, By Sweet Carole leaves no mystery of where its visuals come from, looking like a lost and restored 50s Disney film. But the gameplay is also a tribute to survival horror works like Clock Tower. In fact, I would say that By Sweet Carole is the closest thing we'll ever get to another Clock Tower game. Set at the turn of the 20th century, as women fought for their rights at the start of the suffrage movement, By Sweet Carole has you playing as the young Lana Benton, an orphan whose only friend, Carol, has mysteriously disappeared. As Lana goes in search of her friend, the disappearance of whom no one at her orphanage seems to care about, she finds herself transported to the kingdom of Corolla, a land corrupted by Mr. Kin, an evil being who haunts Lana. By Sweet Carole obviously oozes its visual style, but its gameplay also has a couple neat mechanics that I really enjoyed, like the ability to switch between Lana's human form and a rabbit form. Switching is required to solve the game's puzzles and traverse levels stealthily. I also adored Mr. Basie, the game's other playable character who puts the smackdown on enemies with his umbrella and also has shape-shifting powers required to solve puzzles. The story of By Sweet Carole is touching in a way that I didn't expect it to be. Lana's life at the orphanage is no picnic, and exploring her life and relationship with Carol was quite interesting. Like many survival horror games, the messages of By Sweet Carole are buried behind layers of thematic obfuscation, but once I got to the end and everything made sense, I was moved by the story it told. Complementing its presentation are strong performances and a great original soundtrack, which all helped make By Sweet Carole one of 2025's most unique looking and sounding horror games. Heartworm is a survival horror throwback about confronting death. I played the demo for Heartworm earlier this year, and I'm glad to say that the game's 1.0 release exceeded all expectations. In Heartworm, you play as Sam, whose anguish over the death of her grandfather leads her to an abandoned house where internet rumors say that you can find closure by contacting lost loved ones. After getting stuck in a world of fragmented and corrupted memories, she's got to find the answers she's looking for or die trying. Heartworm plays like a combination of Silent Hill 1 and the classic Resident Evil trilogy, even down to having an option for tank controls, which I gleefully used the entire game through. That's not to say, however, that the game is fully derivative without anything to add to a legacy formula. Heartworm has some of the best fixed camera angles I've ever seen. The game is stunning, and you can feel the intentionality behind so many of its angles and tracking shots, all of which add to the game's surreal nature. Heartworm doesn't have traditional survival horror combat, using Sam's camera as a deterrent to foes instead of conventional weapons. The camera doubles as a lighting tool as well, illuminating rooms to help you navigate. The puzzles are also well thought out, although I will admit, I got smoked on these chess puzzles. If you like chess and survival horror, this is definitely your game. Heartworm succeeds because it knows exactly the game it's trying to be and pulls off its mechanics and story in ways that are both genuine and fresh for such a classic genre. Puzzle games, and those that just make you think, are among my favorite kinds of games. This category is for every game that I resisted Googling solutions for. Blueprints is a roguelike puzzle adventure game where you have to find the hidden 46th room in a manor you inherited from your great-granduncle. There are few games I've played this year as beautifully crafted as Blueprints, and even fewer that I could describe as an emotional roller coaster. This year was my foray into roguelikes. Blueprints, with its random rooms, was a great, if somewhat brutal, introduction to the genre. In Blueprints, your first objective is to get from the start of the manor to the end. To progress, you choose between a random slate of 3 rooms, each with different attributes, categories, and exits. If you box yourself in with too many dead ends, or you run out of steps to traverse the manor, your day ends and you start again the next day with all the rooms reset. There's items and tools all around the house that will help you in this quest, each with different interactions throughout the house. The first couple hours of finding out how rooms work and trying to solve puzzles is magical. I love puzzle games, and Blueprints' puzzles are among the best and most nuanced I've seen. The best part about Blueprints is that it actually lets you think. It doesn't hold your hand at all, to the point where complaints that the puzzles may be too esoteric may have merit, but I loved that about this game. And where some people may be turned off by the combination of puzzles and RNG, I can confidently say that this is a combination that I wasn't sure I'd like, but I was wrong. For every failure and dead end, there was an aha, or a moment of conscious strategic decision-making that got me closer to room 46. Though the majority of the game's contents lie beyond its primary goal, actually getting to room 46 was one of the best gaming moments I've had in ages. It's hard for games to nail a true sense of accomplishment, because I think accomplishment takes some degree of adversary. If you've been playing games for enough years, they start to melt together and become less and less challenging. But Blueprints' randomness and refusal to give away its puzzles was a breath of fresh air. In that sense, Blueprints' greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, where some players will love the randomness, others will hate it. I sit somewhere in the middle. By the end of my playthrough, the RNG was becoming frustrating, but I also acknowledged that it was a fundamental part of what makes the game so exciting and why I kept playing. Not being able to get exactly what I wanted at any given moment and having to strategize around random obstacles to solve puzzles was just part of the fun. It's said that luck is what happens when opportunity meets preparation, and in its wicked cleverness, I have played no game that better embodies that than Blueprints. The Roottrees Are Dead is a detective game where you, a genealogist, are tasked with mapping and uncovering the true lineage of the famous Roottree estate. The year is 1998, so the tools at your disposal to solve this mystery range from an early search browser, personal memoirs, newspapers from decades prior, and more. It's hard to talk at length about The Roottrees Are Dead without giving away much. It takes place mostly on one screen, where you progress using deductive reasoning to form the family tree. Despite having little mechanical complexity, the Roottrees Are Dead has so much charm in its art and overall writing that it's almost impossible to not engross yourself in this family's story to see how certain events played out and what the entire family tree looks like at the end. I took a chance on this game at the start of the year and was beyond impressed by how engaging it was. I would absolutely recommend the Roottrees Are Dead to anyone with an eye for mystery. Trials of Innocence is a heavyweight in the attorney-like genre, games that emulate the gameplay and feel of Capcom's amazing Ace Attorney series. Coming very close to the classic Phoenix Wright visuals and humor, Trials of Innocence ups the ante with voice acting, a confrontation mechanic, and a continuous story told across all its cases. In Trials of Innocence, you play as either Luna Ray, a rookie attorney, or her mentor, Charlie Drake, a much more experienced lawyer heading the Drake and Thomas firm. Cases see you investigating murders by visiting defendants, questioning locals, and of course attending trials where you have to cross-examine and interrogate suspects until you reach the truth. I have to admit, I didn't know the attorney-like genre even existed because I had never gone looking for it. As a huge fan of the Ace Attorney games, Trials of Innocence feels like a mighty and genuine effort to recreate what worked about those games, and it truly pulls it off. Even down to the weird, kooky characters like one of the defendants who pretends he's a wolf. Now, I will say, the translation from what I assume was the game's original Chinese text to English does leave a little to be desired, but most of the humor and sass of the characters still comes through. Trials of Innocence might have gone a little unnoticed this year due to what appears to have been a false DMCA claim that took the game off Steam for 2 months, but it's a great game, and if it interests you, I think the team behind it would greatly appreciate your support. Cathy Rain 2 Soothsayer is the sequel to 2016's fantastic pixel point-and-click Cathy Rain. I played both games this year, and though I absolutely loved Cathy Rain, Soothsayer is an improvement in virtually all categories. Taking place in 1998, 3 years since the first game, Cathy has moved into the bustling city of Cassidy and opened her own private investigation firm. Things aren't going very well financially, but Cathy sees an opportunity to turn her luck around by claiming the reward for finding the Soothsayer, a serial killer racking up bodies and leaving a scrying mirror at every crime scene. In Cathy Rain 2, you investigate and interrogate all of the clues you find and potential suspects you track down. Every feature and mechanic from the first game has been thoroughly updated for Soothsayer, making you really feel Cathy's progression as a PI. Puzzles are more abundant and considerably more involved. There's so many more interactions with characters, and this game has twice as many characters, and it goes without saying, but the fidelity of the pixel art has also seen a major upgrade. Cathy Rain was already a great looking game, but Soothsayer is just beautiful. There's so much personality in the new character portraits, and the game's presentation is brought to a whole new level with its addition of animated cutscenes. Story-wise, I was hooked from the start, and glad to hear both Cathy and Eileen's voice actresses reprise their roles from the first Cathy Rain. The characters are now at odds with each other, and it adds an interesting foil to an already complex narrative. On the long list of things this sequel improves, the writing is on there too. Soothsayer has a much longer story than the first game, and juggles a new cast of characters who each have their own oddities. The writing also navigates seamlessly through comedic and serious moments, being one of the funnier games I played this year despite its subject material. The writing for Cathy especially was tremendous. You can tell she's a more mature character, but her flaws still deeply impact every aspect of her life. I believe Cathy Rain 2 is the biggest project that developer Clifftop Games has ever done, and I'm ecstatic to report that they absolutely stuck the landing. Soothsayer is one of my favorite games this year, and I'd like to give the game extra props for releasing on GOG. If you want to grab a DRM-free version of this game, you have the option. Regardless of where the game is bought though, I highly recommend Cathy Rain 2 Soothsayer, a great sequel and hopefully not the last chapter of Cathy's story. Do you ever get annoyed when trailers for games come out and either have no release date or are so far away that you'll be playing them in a nursing home? This category is for every amazing demo or early access game I played this year that you can download right now. If you need some games to look forward to next year, this section is for you. Longtime fans of this channel may be shocked, stunned, and disgusted at the presence of a Bubsy game anywhere near a best of list, but I can report that someone has finally done it. Indie studio Fabraz is making a good Bubsy game. Bubsy 4D is a 3D platformer starring infamous mascot legend, Bubsy Bobcat. Right off the bat, I can tell you, this demo is genuinely fun. It only took 3 decades, but Bubsy finally controls like a normal video game character. Bubsy's movement is now very smooth and agile, exactly how you would expect a mascot based off a cat to behave. In pursuit of a new enemy that has stolen Earth's sheep, the goal of each level is to collect yarn balls and the Golden Fleece, along with blueprints to help Bubsy learn new moves. The levels are structured in a way where just going down a linear path won't get you all the yarn, and you'll need to explore and use combinations of moves to reach some locations. Bubsy can even turn into a huge ball. Personality-wise, I love what they've done with Bubsy. He's definitely older, and while the game pokes fun at itself, it's not obnoxiously self-deprecating. Its reference to previous games are done well, and it's clear that Fabraz didn't want to make an ironic game that spends all of its time in the past. As a first for the franchise, it appears Bubsy 4D will also have a focus on speedrunning, with leaderboards and movement tech capable of being chained to go faster and faster. I'll admit, I'm usually skeptical of revivals like this, and especially one born entirely from meme culture, which I may or may not have contributed to, but Fabraz is proving that they can do something interesting and fun with both these characters and the property itself. If Bubsy 4D releases at an equal or higher level of quality as this demo, that'll be some serious cause for alarm, because there will be, at last, a great Bubsy game. Pigface is a gritty sandbox shooter with a dash of immersive sim elements. Think Hitman meets Condemned Criminal Origins and Manhunt. Pigface opens with its player character, a woman named Exit, being beaten, kidnapped, and surgically implanted with a bomb at the base of her skull. Our new handler threatens to flip the switch unless we carry out missions across the city for them. Your rundown apartment, that looks like it was painted with a diluted mixture of several bodily fluids, serves as your base of operations where you can change outfits, buy weapons, and decide which missions to go on. As you're driven to your selected mission, you can choose weapons, accessories, and masks that provide buffs. Once you arrive, the game lets you decide how you want to tackle each level's main and side objectives, accommodating your choices with its excellent level design that encourages completion of tasks in whatever order and manner you'd like to achieve them. Pigface's guns feel great. The levels unravel naturally as you explore, and you can practically smell the game's rancid atmosphere. One of its best features is the ability to replay missions. The more that you replay, the more cash you have to spend, and the more ludicrous weapon combinations you can create, like this suppressed LMG sniper. I can't wait to see more of Pigface next year, especially because the developer has already started delivering on the game's content roadmap during its stay in early access. Nighthawks is a vampire RPG where you're a recently turned member of the undead clawing their way to the top of the food chain. In this world, vampires have been exposed to the public. Think Vampire the Masquerade, except the masquerade has been broken forever. Coincidentally, after dodging a bullet with the tepid offerings of Bloodlines 2, Nighthawks managed to scratch an itch that I thought only World of Darkness could. Nighthawks opens with an impressive character creator, allowing you to choose the vocation of your sire, the lineage of your blood, your vampiric power, and your knowledge base. All choices that affect your stats and abilities during your playthrough. From there, you begin your quest to find an item of great importance that someone stole from you before they disappeared. The potential of Nighthawks shines in its narrative and characters, both chained to the city of Cradlebridge, a corrupted and lawless zone where other vampires have already set up shop whom you'll butt heads with to increase your influence and control. I particularly liked this game's companion system, which is introduced immediately, with many more potential options teased throughout the demo. And to my surprise, all characters were fully voice acted, adding to the game's immersion and substantially increasing its production value. As good as the demo for Nighthawks is, you can see a number of mechanics and role-playing features that seem to be lying in wait to be used in the game's full release. Nighthawks is the game in this category I'm most excited to see the future of, because if developer The Curiosity Engine can pull through, Nighthawks will easily be one of the greatest vampire games of the modern era. Through the years, there have been many independent and AA games proudly wearing their classic Resident Evil inspiration. Phase Zero is such a game, and in my opinion, one of the best among them at capturing the mechanics, atmosphere, and presentation of early survival horror. In this short demo, you traverse a hospital overrun by the infected. Phase Zero manages to feel fresh while still invoking the spirit of classic Resident Evil by keeping a very tight pace and celebrating what we love about this era of survival horror. The inventory puzzles are fun, exploration in the hospital is interesting, the combat is fair, and the files you find across the hospital lead you down the story's rabbit hole, making you curious to learn more about what happened there. If the rest of Phase Zero comes out as concise, clever, and atmospheric as this demo, then we should be ready to include it among other great survival horror revivals. Phase Zero is also one of few demos with bonuses once you beat it, including a model viewer. This is a game clearly being made by passionate developers who love this genre, and I wish them nothing but the best in the rest of their development journey. Opus Prism Peak is the first 3D game in Sugono's Opus series. Known for their narrative visual novels, Prism Peak is looking to break out of 2D with a blend of interactive narrative and puzzle gameplay. We play as Eugene, whose life has come to a standstill after a series of layoffs, a divorce, and the death of his grandfather, who raised him and initially sparked his interest in photography. While returning to his village to attend his grandfather's funeral, he crashes his car, and upon awakening realizes that he's in a different world where animals speak and regain their memories after he photographs them. He finds a child named Ren, who also has amnesia, and together they travel in search of the Seer, a mysterious figure who can help return everything to normal. The gameplay sees Eugene conversing with the animals and taking photographs of the environment that act as offerings. In the short time the demo lasts, it weaves you into Eugene's story, and by the time it was over, I really wanted to learn more about him and what's actually going on in the story. I have my theories, and I'm excited to see how the story unfolds in the game's full release. There Are No Ghosts at the Grand is a musical clean-em-up. After inheriting the Grand Hotel from your estranged father, you've got a month to renovate it using his power tools. This was one of the year's shorter demos, but also a tight package where one can see many of the game's mechanics and how fun it'll be once the game releases. What caught my eye about No Ghosts was its stylization. It's got so much charm in just the way it looks. And it's another game that's shaping up to be really funny. While you're cleaning, the tutorial bot attached to your tools spouts off some of the demo's funniest dialogue. There Are No Ghosts at the Grand is one of my most anticipated games of 2026. Genre blending is becoming more and more common, and I'm always rooting for games that pull it off well. Cairn is an awesome mountain climbing simulator with some of the most original gameplay you'll see today. In Cairn, you play as Ava, an avid rock climber trying to become the first person to reach the summit of the hellacious Mount Kami. What's immediately special about Cairn is its climbing system. I've never seen anything like it. You control each of Ava's limbs individually, and you climb by gripping and planting her extremities as if she was really climbing. This makes for gameplay where you really have to think about where you're moving, and there's a tension present at all times, both figuratively and literally, as Ava can't hold poor positions for too long without her strength failing her. Almost every surface in the game is climbable, letting you really own your progression by climbing wherever you'd like. Cairn lets you plan your routes by zooming out and surveying the mountainside, and this is important because you also have to manage resources like Ava's stamina, thirst, and body temperature. The game's focus on survivalism isn't just a veneer, and you'll quickly find that out if you fail a climb. Cairn, however, isn't super punishing, and you can create your own natural checkpoints by planting pitons in the mountain as you climb. Cairn is really a game you just have to play, and I have a feeling that once released, it's going to be a hit, and especially popular in the speedrunning community. Texnoplazm is a futuristic melee shooter hybrid with some of the most high-octane action I saw this year. Texnoplazm stars the girl with no name, a synth freed from her programming and pursued by thugs that want to default her to factory settings. Her only option is to fight. This is a gun-fu game. It combines brawling and guns to give the player several options in each combat encounter. By perfect parrying enemies, you can chain combinations of attacks together to obliterate them in stylistic ways. The game's also got movement abilities to help you close distance on enemies and set them up for a whooping. Texnoplazm's combat is brutal and satisfying in a way that a lot of games can't capture today. It's got this dopamine cycle going for it because of how chaining its mechanics is rewarded. The combat arenas allow for lots of experimentation, and the locations themselves let you do some hilarious things to enemies. For full disclosure, in the past, I have spoken quite a bit to the developer of this game, Mothership Loudspeakers, because I was a huge fan of their last project, Ghostware. But even if I had found it by pure chance with no prior knowledge, due to how fun and clearly inspired by some of my other favorite games it is, I would give Texnoplazm a glowing recommendation. This year, I finally got into virtual reality, and it's absolutely incredible. It's the most immersive experience I've ever had playing games. While I didn't play too many, here are the best VR games I played this year. Sushi Ben is an outrageously funny, anime-styled narrative adventure game and the only one on this list that comes in both VR and regular non-VR. The game starts you on your way to Kotobuki Town, a small village that's being bought up piecemeal by a morally depraved real estate agent named Tsujigiri Minami, who is attempting to transform the town into a concrete hellscape. To rally the people of Kotobuki Town, you have to help Ben, an aspiring sushi chef, reopen the town's sushi business, as you also help the rest of the community with the help of Hyakumaru, a Tsukumagami, or a spirit that basically adopts you. Sushi Ben feels like a labor of love, like the people who made it really wanted to make it. It's got so many wacky, out there ideas in both its presentation and gameplay that it wins you over quickly. The gameplay of Sushi Ben has you meeting and doing quests for the residents of Kotobuki Town, which involves fishing, catching bugs, ghost busting, ping pong, chiseling statues, and so much more. The quests themselves are basically those minigames, and completing them helps move the story along, with each quest fulfilled seeing you eat sushi with the character you just helped. Sushi Ben has a very large cast, and anytime characters speak, manga panels with their expressions pop up and look amazing, especially in VR where they take full advantage of the immersion. Non-VR Sushi Ben plays perfectly fine as well, and comes with the overall purchase, not making you pay for two different versions of the game. With that said, the interactivity in VR was really fun and well integrated. I enjoyed the fishing and all of the other little activities the game has you do. If the Quest 3's battery life wasn't so abysmal, I would fish all day for Junko. The game's sense of humor is charming, and I realized that the second I failed the Stooge test when I chose to join Minami at the very first chance I had, and it gave me a game over screen in the first 20 minutes. It's really hard to laugh when you have a VR headset on, but this game had me cackling. Sushi Ben is a great game that can be enjoyed even if you don't have a VR headset. I would highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of this visual style and wants a story-rich game with very fun characters. Ghost Town is a puzzle adventure VR masterpiece. Set in London during the 80s, you play as Edith Penrose, a paranormal detective who exorcises ghosts from haunted places. Edith's brother, Adam, has disappeared, and it's up to Edith and her roommate Rena to find Adam. Ghost Town is unlike any game I've ever experienced, and was made by developers with ambitions to push storytelling, mechanics, and immersion to places that traditional games can't reach with their comparatively limited interactivity. VR is uniquely suited for any type of game where there's a disconnect between the player and the protagonist's physicality, and Ghost Town takes full advantage of this by making all of its puzzles interactable, their solutions requiring the player to manipulate levers, switches, panels, and even light itself, with many puzzles involving projections cast by Edith's spotlight. These puzzles aren't just delightfully clever, they also do a great job of immersing the player in the game's world and Edith's job as a supernatural sleuth. Every puzzle in the game is very mechanical and involved, which also gives you the sense that you've really accomplished something when you figure out how to work everything. Ghost Town's puzzles aren't its only interactable components though. There's also a fantastic stage where you get to interact with magical objects, and those blew me away. The visuals of Ghost Town are just insane. The game looks amazing and does things with its presentation that I've never seen in other games. All of this is wrapped up by Ghost Town's great story and performances, which also push the storytelling bounds of current two-dimensional games. It's one thing to play a normal first-person game sitting down, and that's obviously a perfectly fine experience, but when you're really inside of a game and standing up, the dynamics of storytelling change in ways that you don't expect. Like when you're told of a certain character's backstory and you feel like an active participant in the story, or when you find out things about Edith because you physically interacted with an object. Without a story this strong that understands it's being told in VR, some of this would fall flat, but the story works in perfect harmony with the gameplay to deliver a transformative experience. I'm no VR connoisseur, but of the couple VR titles I've played, Ghost Town is far and away the best of them, and a slam dunk of a game. These are my games of the year, and ones that generally have a step above almost everything else you've seen so far in terms of scope and budget. Lost Records Bloom and Rage is a narrative adventure game from the creators of Life is Strange. Like many games today, if I had an hour for this one alone, I still couldn't tell you every little thing I loved about it, but I can sum up Lost Records like this. It's a game made by clearly talented, but also deeply experienced developers that have learned a lot from their experiences making titles like this, which has culminated in their best game yet. Lost Records takes place in two time periods, 1995 and 2022, and follows the shy Swan Holloway, who befriends 3 other girls during a summer of her teenage years. Cutting from past and present, we have to figure out why someone has sent the now adult women a mysterious package addressed to their teenage band, Bloom and Rage, 27 years after the last time they all spoke. Interactive narrative games that are driven forward purely by dialogue choices have been around for quite a while now. As a big fan of Life is Strange, who was underwhelmed by double exposure, Lost Records isn't just a lifeline for fans, it's an evolution of the genre itself. Lost Records 2 episodes, Tape 1 and 2, are split into chapters that see Swan interacting with the lovingly detailed world around her. Using her camcorder, Swan can record footage of memorable objects, locations, and characters she sees that can be played back and edited into home movies. The subjects of Swan's footage are usually her new friends, Autumn, Nora, and Kat, who form a sisterhood through their shared rebellious nature. Lost Records goes above and beyond to convince us of the authenticity of its characters, with a robust and mechanically advanced dialogue system that emulates real conversations. In most games, you're given 3 or 4 static options the second someone's dialogue ends, but in Lost Records, the more you listen, the more options you have. And that's precisely what they are, options. The choices in Lost Records dialogue are neither vague or gamified win buttons. They exist to genuinely convey how you feel about a character or situation, and each come with their own consequences for the overall story. In either time period, players can befriend, shun, or romance any of Swan's friends, each choice resulting in unique cutscenes and wildly totally different variations of the last half an hour of the game. Lost Records is one of my favorite games in recent memory, and I've intentionally glossed over specific story elements because it's something that really needs to be experienced almost blind, not unlike the original Life is Strange. Through the growth of its characters, Lost Records also displays the growth of its developer. It's a game with a soul, and that's why developer Don't Nod is exactly the type of developer and publisher the industry desperately needs right now. Split Fiction is a split-screen co-op adventure game from the brilliant Hazelight Studios. When writers Mio and Zoe are invited to test an experimental machine in exchange for book publication, things go south quickly and they end up experiencing each other's stories in a simulation as they fight to get out. Split Fiction might be the best directed game I played this year. The sheer amount of moving parts between its minute-to-minute gameplay, set pieces, minigames, and story seems like it would have been a nightmare to manage, but the game pulls off everything so smoothly that you'd be none the wiser to what must have been a tremendous game dev workload. Coming off of It Takes Two, Hazelight had to somehow deliver an even bigger experience that wasn't just a copy of what they'd done before, and I think they pulled it off. The gameplay of Split Fiction sees you and a friend navigating alternating worlds between Mio and Zoe's stories, sometimes cyberpunk, sometimes fantasy. The challenge comes from platforming puzzles, shoot-'em-ups, and other mechanical hybrids that all have to be timed in sync with your partner to successfully progress. Though the game has its own litany of original ideas, the gameplay sections are sometimes tributes to other games, which was always pretty charming. Split Fiction is definitely not what I would describe as a difficult game. Most of the difficulty comes from working with a friend, and that's also where most of the laughs come from whenever either of you screw up. I found myself liking the story and characters of Split Fiction a lot more than I thought I would when I started the game. Zoe and Mio are polar opposites in almost every way, or at least that's how it appears before the game unravels each character's backstory. They went from characters I was indifferent to characters I wanted to learn more about, to actively rooting for their success. In many ways, they're characters who save each other, and I thought the bond they built along the game was believable and earned, especially in some very sincere moments that deal with grief. In a less congested year, Split Fiction probably would have been a shoo-in for more awards than it's received, but to me, it's still one of 2025's top highlights, and Hazelight should be very proud of what they've accomplished here. I would highly recommend Split Fiction, especially because of the very consumer-friendly Friends Pass, where only one person has to buy it on any of its available platforms for 2 people to enjoy it together. Back in June, I remember seeing the first trailer for Dispatch and immediately rushing to play its demo. It was short, but there was so much personality in what I played that I knew it would be a must-buy when it finally came out. Saying that the full release didn't disappoint is an understatement. I knew Dispatch would be good, but not one of my favorite games of this decade good, or that it would blow up thanks to such glowing word of mouth. Dispatch is an interactive narrative game putting you in the shoes of Robert Robertson III, a superhero who can't be a superhero anymore. After damaging his suit beyond repair in a conflict with the villain who killed his father, Robert is forced to retire as Mecha Man. He is soon approached by famous hero Blonde Blazer to join SDN, the Superhero Dispatch Network, where he has to manage a team of former villains trying to become heroes. Dispatch's gameplay has you managing and interacting with the Z-Team, sending them out to SDN subscriber calls and speaking with them between shifts. Though Dispatch's SDN gameplay is both fun and surprisingly addicting, the game's bread and butter is definitely its writing and characters, with its plot and cast among the best of the year. When Dispatch starts, we can see that Robert's life has practically fallen apart, but meeting Blazer, reconnecting with his friend Chase, and being saddled with this group of malcontents gives him a newfound purpose. His past as Mecha Man is what creates his contrast with the Z-Team, seeing the best in them when they cannot. Dispatch works because it's equal parts genuine and hilarious. I thought what I played of the game's demo was funny, and that didn't even have much Invisigal dialogue. The full game is a riot, and its comedy is part of the reason I think the game has resonated so much. Dispatch is fundamentally a very human game, and as a lifelong fan of superheroes, it's nice to see a work emphasizing that powers don't make the hero. It's equally refreshing to see a superhero property actually focus on saving people, because what's the point of being a hero if not for helping the regular everyday person? I don't believe in superhero fatigue, and I get the sense that developer Ad Hoc Studios doesn't either. I'm confident that I'm not alone in wanting to see what they do next, because Dispatch is one of this year's best games, and a standout in a year of standouts. Hades 2 is the sequel of the year, and a monolith of a game with few rivals in terms of scope, presentation, gameplay, story, and soundtrack. For its price, I would actually say Hades 2 had 2025's best value in gaming, which for a year this stacked is a testament to Supergiant's insane talent. Hades 2 is the sequel to 2020's action roguelike Hades, skipping forward in time to the return of Kronos, the Titan of Time, who has imprisoned the House of Hades after breaking free from his prison in Tartarus. Melinoe, daughter of Hades, trained since birth in secret by the witch Hecate, is tasked with delivering death to Kronos to free her family and bring an end to Kronos' siege on Olympus. When I jumped into roguelikes this year, I was not necessarily expecting such epic and heroic storytelling as the kind in Hades, a procedurally spun narrative fused with the structure of its fight, die, and repeat gameplay. Everything Hades achieved, from story to gameplay, is turned up to 11 in Hades 2, a game with an even higher amount of attention to the player's actions and a pivot to more methodical gameplay. Immediately coming off of Hades, I missed the frantic, oftentimes cheesy gameplay of 1, but after playing more of 2, I'm soundly in the camp that now prefers the combat and overall balance of the second in spades. Hades 2 takes a step back from some of the more ridiculous abilities that you could spam ad nauseum to focus more on player positioning and crowd control. The change to casts alone is exceptional, and personally, these playstyles are so much more fun because you're basically hurting the enemies, and the burst damage power fantasy is incredibly satisfying. The balance of Hades 2 has also been systemically overhauled, now allowing for more modular and economical approaches to Melinoe's buffs via the Arcana cards as opposed to those of Zagreus, who had to be all in because of the way the Black Mirror worked. While I am comparing 2 to 1 often here, I see them as companion pieces, or one large experience, and that theme is ever present in the story of Hades 2. I absolutely love this story, and without giving away much, I think Supergiant struck a perfect balance between a new narrative with its own plot and characters and the cast of the first game. The character redesigns are just stunning, and new characters have their own look while still looking like they fit perfectly in this world. If it isn't obvious, I love Hades 2. It amplifies everything I loved about Hades and adds its own flair and gameplay identity. Hades 2 is the type of game you can't believe you only paid $30 for, and it's a product of a wonderfully creative team firing on all cylinders. I don't know how Supergiant tops this, but I can't wait to find out. Each year, for as long as I can remember, I've been able to pinpoint the exact moment that I knew I was playing the game of the year. For Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, that came right at the end of its prologue, and everything that followed was a wild journey of excitement, anxiety, wonder, and grief. Clair Obscur, Expedition 33 is a turn-based RPG where the youth of a broken world seek to end the decades-long curse of the Paintress, who kills anyone older than the number she conjures each year. Though I strongly believe that at the core of every great game is the game that you interact with, in modern times it's fair to argue that a combination of great gameplay and a great story is invaluable and present in most critically acclaimed games. The story of of Clair Obscur is among the most original, well-told, and performed that I've experienced. I'll remember its characters and story beats for years to come, and for better or worse, hold future games to the standards set by this one. It's going to be hard to forget the tenacity of this cast. Where many games feature characters of disparate hopes and goals, the playable characters of Clair Obscur are bound by their duty to document and find means to destroy the paintress. The dynamic this creates between them is complex and oftentimes reminded me of the relationships of siblings. Across the way, you'll meet other characters too, who are all memorable and incredibly authentic in their own ways. The characters of Clair Obscur feel like they believe everything they say. There's a real conviction among its cast that is hard to find nowadays, and I think that's because the story drives the stakes of the mission home so well and so early that you can't help but take everyone seriously. Of course, even with such an amazing story, I don't think a game like this would have been the smash hit it's become without a gameplay loop that was both fun to engage with and satisfying. The turn-based party combat of Expedition 33 has you switching between 3 of its 4 playable characters and building them up with various skills and weapons to fight the Paintress's cacophony of monsters. Each character has their own playstyle, with abilities that have to be unlocked through skill trees. There's actually a decent learning curve to how certain weapons synergize with attacks that I really enjoyed making sense of. It's impossible to talk about Clair Obscur and not mention its dodge and parry mechanics, one of the most fun variants of this system I've seen across the genre. If your ego won't allow you to not parry every single attack, you might have a hard time, but what I really liked about being able to dodge or parry was that it made fights mechanically intensive and much more rewarding personally when I learned an enemy's attack pattern and finally beat them. I could talk about Clair Obscur for hours. I could tell you about how I loved the exploration, the silly mini games, or its goddamn perfect soundtrack, but these are things you should experience for yourself if you haven't already. If you have played the game and want to learn about how brilliant its art direction is and how it convinces the player that the game is much bigger than it is, I did a video on that subject earlier this year that you can find in the description below. Expedition 33 is a game that the collective gaming consciousness will remember decades from now, and is the perfect game to cap off a year of independent and AA success stories throughout the industry that will inevitably inspire others, for those who come after. And that about does it. It struck me while putting this last category together that there wasn't a single game whose base price was $60. Previous years in this decade have had some of my favorite games of all time, but I can say without much hesitation that 2025 has been the best of them, for what it meant to me personally. For years, I've wanted to make a best of gaming list for everyone, from people who want the bleeding edge of gameplay and innovation, to those who unfortunately face being priced out of gaming simply because of where they live or other economic factors across the world. I knew that I would have to leave my comfort zone and start playing games that I wouldn't have previously looked at, and I think I've finally done it. I hope you found something today that sparked your interest. And if you didn't see your favorite game of the year on here, chances are I just didn't play it. I have a feeling that I'm going to spend 2026 playing a ton of games I missed in 2025, while still trying to branch out to even more diverse genres. Until next year, thanks for watching.